Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. It is time for our monthly Q&A. We've got loads of questions from you guys on the community tab, so we're going to go through about 40 or so. I think about 20 or maybe we'll get that many in. We're going to go through a few of them in this part anyway. Yeah. Also, if you haven't heard about Kev from Tech Showdown, who's very sick at the moment, and we made a video about this yesterday, then please feel free to check that video out. We have a GoFundMe for him and his family. Anyway, we'll jump into the questions. Okay, first question. This one's coming to us live from the comment section as people are viewing the video. And they're asking, what is with Tim's forehead? Good question. What is with your forehead?
So when we do these Q&A videos, I drive out here to Steve's place and chucked all of my gear into the boot that I need to bring over. And then, just the boot lid hit me right in the forehead as I was packing some stuff in. The boot latch just... bam, straight in there, blood everywhere. It's gotten a bit better since then, but obviously it's going to distract you guys for the next couple of Q&A videos. So, pretty silly of me, but whatever. Hopefully it won't be too distracting and we can get onto the actual questions.
The main thing, Tim's okay.
Yeah, no concussion, I don't think, so it should be all right.
We'll see how he goes with a few of these answers. Okay, so the actual first real question is, what is the best CPU and GPU combo for 144Hz 1080p gaming? I've done a few videos that cover this pretty well. I guess to answer this specific question, I guess I'd need to know, are we going for like the best maximum performance configuration, or are we going for like the best value?
Yep.
I guess the best maximum performance is pretty easy. It'd be something like 8700K, 9700K, 9900K, 900KS. You guys get the point. An Intel CPU, a high-end Core i7 or Core i9 Intel CPU with, well, I suppose your 2080 Ti or a Titan RTX, if you will. So you're probably not asking about that because that's pretty obvious. Just buy the most expensive stuff possible. As for sort of the best value combo, if we're talking about current generation hardware, I think for gaming, especially at 1080p 144Hz, I think you'd have to say something like the Ryzen 5 3600 is probably... Yep. Would you agree with that? Yeah. Yep. And as for the GPU, there's a few different options there. I think if it's really value we're talking about, then it would have to be like the Radeon RX 5700 or the 5700 XT. And if you're going for that bit of extra performance, you could probably justify something like a 2070 Super. Yeah,
I would have said even... I mean, obviously, it's getting up much more up in the expensive end, but the 2080 will pretty regularly give you your 144Hz at 1080p or more. So
an RTX 2080.
RTX 2080 Super.
Yeah, definitely.
If you want to like get it locked at that frame rate at ultra settings at 1080p.
At that point, it's obviously Nvidia.
Yes.
So you just get the most expensive Nvidia graphics card you could afford at that point, but you do enter the sort of point of diminishing returns once you get up to 2080s and beyond.
But yeah, certainly that $350 to $400 range upwards is sort of where you're going to have to be.
Yep. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful.
Heavily upvoted question, this one, and I'm glad this one's heavily upvoted because it's a good question.
Yeah, it is.
What's up with manufacturers and reviewers completely brushing away the FreeSync label and only talking about G-Sync compatible? It's extremely misleading. I'm seeing many people in the comments of reviews who think those monitors are only G-Sync and need to have an Nvidia graphics card. There's even some reviewers who only talk about actual G-Sync, which is just straight up wrong. Yeah, I mean... it's a very interesting situation because I've heard some people say that basically Nvidia's hijacked the FreeSync brand by coming out with G-Sync compatible. Mm-hmm. And I sort of get that opinion. I think, so first of all, there's nothing inherently bad about Nvidia supporting adaptive sync monitors. In fact, it's actually really good because now Nvidia owners can have access to a much wider range of monitors. But the branding issue is going to be an issue until people, I guess, get more accustomed to the fact that G-Sync compatible displays are actually still able to be used with AMD graphics cards. And I think once the G-Sync module sort of becomes less of a thing outside of G-Sync Ultimate and you only have G-Sync compatible monitors, then it'll potentially get to a point where people will realize that those are just widely compatible. But certainly for now, people are being very, very confused by this issue. And you'll often see on monitor pages, it will say G-Sync compatible, and then you have to scroll down and it might eventually say FreeSync or adaptive sync. But it's just a branding thing. I mean, these companies want to have the logo on the box, so they have to pay exclusivity effectively.
I see
So you
the
get one or the
concern,
other.
and it's very unfortunate for AMD because they were essentially the good guys in all this that offered the free version, and then the guys that ended up charging for it that eventually went free for it to make sense have ended up winning the brand war there.
Yeah, and I think I'm not 100% sure about this, so maybe mark it down as speculation, but certainly with a lot of logos that you see on boxes, like if you see the HDMI logo, companies have to pay for that. If you see display HDR, I'm fairly confident companies have to pay for that. And I'm very sure, I'm not 100% sure, I'm pretty sure that's the same situation for your FreeSync and your G-Sync badges. You know, it's a licensed logo, so there's probably going to have to be some sort of deal done there. And it's just a situation where if you have the option of paying for one or the other, you're probably going to pay for the brand that's more recognizable because Nvidia GPUs have a significantly higher market share than AMD. So if you have the option to go one or the other, you're probably going to sway towards G-Sync, unfortunately, for AMD and unfortunately for the confusion that it creates in the market. But I think it will get better over time, but certainly for now, the issue coming from G-Sync to G-Sync compatible has caused all this confusion. And yeah, I'd love if they could have both logos on the box, like you see, because motherboards, right, have SLI and Crossfire on the motherboard boxes.
Well, I'm not really sure about modern ones, but yes, I would say even in that situation, I'm looking around, I have no motherboard boxes examples. I think probably SLI would be something you would find.
I see one back here that has both on it. This Aorus board has AMD Crossfire and SLI branding printed on the board.
Sure. Yep.
So
yeah,
maybe that'll happen in the future, but I think at least for now, there's definitely some exclusivity deal there.
Okay.
At least on the Nvidia side. So yep.
Being that RTX cards are gaming cards and Quadros are supposed to be for production, what's really different on them other than the software? Can a Quadro game, for example? How productive can an RTX be versus a Quadro? Would it be better to work with an RTX 2080 Ti versus a mid-tier Quadro for the price? And how does the Titan fall into the mix? Is it the best to work and play? Okay, well, I see this sort of stuff a lot. I'm pretty much not an expert on the Quadro stuff because I don't do CAD and all that kind of stuff, and I've never really used one. As for the Titan's role has sort of shifted from, well, over the generations, but now it's mostly just a stupidly expensive gaming graphics card. So it's a GeForce card that's just been branded as a Titan, so they do that with their flagship part. So it won't have the kind of support you get with a Quadro card. So as far as I understand it, and correct me if you have a difference of opinion here, I believe it's down to the drivers, the software for the graphics card, that really determines whether it's focused on gaming or productivity, so CAD work. And I think that's where, well, I think most people agree on that. It's then how different are the drivers. So if I got an RTX graphics card and a Quadro graphics card and I benchmarked them for a CAD application, will they essentially deliver the same performance? And sometimes they might, which will lead people to say there's really no difference. But I think in a situation where you had a CAD application and there was a bug with the GeForce driver, that would never get addressed, whereas for the Quadro cards, it would get addressed.
Yeah, because there's a big validation program that occurs with workstation cards where the software makers and Nvidia, obviously, they basically come together and say, well, our software is designed to work with these cards on these drivers, and we're going to sort of guarantee that.
Yep.
And obviously, Quadro cards are a lot more expensive, but that's one of the things you get, so that if you're making, you know, CAD designs or whatever, or you're doing 3D rendering for a big Hollywood studio or something, you want to make sure that everything is properly certified all down the chain, so that you're not running a gaming driver that's going to change one day and suddenly break things.
Yep.
They make sure that every driver release they release is working with the latest versions of their software. And that's why you pay that premium, because that premium goes to then developing the drivers and paying for that verification and validation program. And often Quadro cards come with more VRAM as well.
Yes. I think where some other confusion comes, if you're like an individual, a hobbyist, or someone trying to get into the industry, then maybe getting an RTX card will work perfectly fine. It's a much more cost.
Small businesses would be probably fine.
But as Tim said, when you're a design house or a big engineering company or whatever, and you've got the money to spend on a Quadro card, that's sort of that's definitely who Nvidia's going after.
They don't blink at that stuff. They're like, oh, that's validated. That's the only thing they care about. It's like, oh, it's got that validation stamp for my software. Done.
Yep.
Sold. I'll pay my $10,000 easily. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary.
Yep.
It's a good question. Why do AMD cards get better over time, while Nvidia cards feel like every driver update is a downgrade? I know the answer is better driver optimization, but is it also Nvidia's way of saying, buy our overpriced GPUs for better performance? I assume buy their new overpriced GPUs, right?
I don't know.
So sort of, what is it, forced obsolescence or planned obsolescence?
Yeah,
or whatever
planned.
That's called. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the end of the question, isn't it?
Yep.
We're not necessarily agreeing with any of the last parts of that question, but yeah, I think it's fair to say that us and other YouTubers have noticed that over time, not always, but quite often, the Radeon GPUs will fare a little bit better over time. And I think, or at least appear better in a matchup. So that it's really interesting how you tackle this. So say a Radeon GPU, what do we pick, like the R9 390 versus the GTX 970, and say the Radeon GPU was 10% slower back when they were released. Now, many years later, it's 10% faster. So does that mean Nvidia's made their cards slower while AMD's made theirs faster? Definitely doesn't mean that. What it could mean, and what usually is the cause of this, is that AMD's drivers have matured. So they don't have the big software budget development team, driver team that Nvidia has, so they work with what they've got. We've talked about this before. As they claw back more market share, we expect them to get better at this sort of stuff. But that's basically what it boils down to most of the time, that AMD's drivers aren't at the same level of maturity as Nvidia's upon release, and it takes them sometimes up to 12 months before they really get the most out of their GPUs. I think we saw that with the RX 480, the 400 series. They got a 10% across the board boost about 12 months after release from memory.
Yeah. And I think the way I've always looked at this is not necessarily that, Nvidia stays like a flat line and then AMD starts from a point and then goes up. It's more that AMD starts from a lower point and is sort of coming up to that flat line that Nvidia starts with.
Sure, yep. And, you can argue that, sure, Nvidia's not optimizing for current games on 3 or 4 year old hardware, which, yeah, we've seen a bit of evidence of that, but it's hard to knock them for that as well. I think AMD does do a better job of that, or it just happens by coincidence that maybe there weren't that many architectural changes, so the optimizations work across a wider range of hardware.
That probably has a lot to do with it, with a lot of their refreshes that they have done, especially for GCN.
And then the other component, I would say, and again, this isn't always the case, but it can affect certain models. The GTX 970 versus R9 390 or 290 comparison, particularly the 390, makes sense, and that's VRAM capacity. So usually you have more memory on the graphics card with AMD at the lower price points. They offer a bit more bang for your buck, I suppose, with that. But that's not always the case. Like
not this generation.
Not this generation, no. Again, though, if you look at like your really low end cards, you can get. Well, I know they're old now, but say even the newer RX 590. That I think is that 8 GB. That's 8 GB standard. That card.
I think so.
So the RTX 2060, for example, I mean that's now been replaced by the super model, but that only has 6 GB as an example. So anyway, yeah, drivers and memory capacity can play a role. I think it's more about that than Nvidia nerfing performance, which is always the thing that people claim, but we see very little to no evidence of. Can B450 Tomahawk run Ryzen 3700X without any issues or, I suppose, overheating? Yeah, you don't need to worry about that. The 8-core and lower chips are very power efficient on the 7nm process. Those boards had no worries running the Ryzen 7 2700X, so no problem with that CPU. B450 Tomahawk, you're probably going to want to pay attention to airflow and sort of room temperatures when you put a 3900X or the upcoming 3950X on it. But yeah, Ryzen 7 parts, not a problem.
What are your thoughts on the Nvidia controversy about bribing YouTubers for exposure in non-Nvidia centered videos? How dumb. How dumb is this controversy?
I think Steve from
isn't it?
Gamers Nexus did a good job of covering that one for us. What do I say? What do I add to this one?
It's mind-boggling that something like this has come up with sort of people pointing out that there's some RTX boxes and just ignoring all the other boxes that are in the background. It's a bit of tunnel vision, a bit of selective sight there.
Well, the original post where this all came from, so some people made videos, or I've only seen a couple of people making videos pointing out that YouTubers are getting paid for boxes, with no evidence, mind you. And I've even seen people on Reddit, because I had 2 RTX boxes here. So the way that happened was, not that long ago, I reviewed the 2060 Super and the 2070 Super, and then I had the 2 boxes sitting here, and I'm like, well, these are current graphics cards, I'll stick those boxes there. The very next video, so that was for the 5700 series video, because I had the 5700 series box here, so I had the RTX boxes there. Very next video, I had to do something with the 5700 series box. I'm like, well, I want to put that on display because that's part of the channel. We just did that. So I stuck it on top and it looked like that. The very next video. So it's a bit silly. For those of you who, I suppose, may have questions about this or don't really understand it or haven't connected the dots, this is kind of like a story of the channel, or at least from my end of it. It's always evolving and changing. It's usually got some current generation stuff that we've just looked at, with some stuff that has some sort of sentiment to us, or maybe some Patreon members or just fans of the channel have sent things in. There's a whole heap of stuff here. There's a lot of different little bits and pieces here, but absolutely none of this is paid to be put there, and it's always changing.
We don't even accept any money from Nvidia, AMD, or Intel at all for anything.
So that's possibly not something that a lot of the YouTubers do. But we can't speak for them. But we absolutely do not accept any money from those 3 companies, just because we focus a lot on Intel and AMD CPUs and stuff like that. And we do sponsorship stuff with, like, MSI pays for our Computex coverage, so we take money from them and we review their products. So a bit of a conflict of interest there. Hard to avoid that kind of stuff. All we can do is tell you that we're always as open and honest as we can be, and hopefully our work reflects that. And as I said to our Patreon members in a live stream earlier, feel free to review everything we do with every new video. Like I said, we for the last 3 years, MSI has paid to send us to Computex, paid for our accommodation, flights, and, paid for our week's wage. And that's been great. But that doesn't mean that we will say nice, good things about them if they don't deserve it. And recently, Tim gave them a very negative monitor review, which they messed up on. To MSI's credit, they pulled that from production, got it fixed, and then got it back out there. We absolutely trashed their X570 motherboards. I could have ignored them and not done that content if I didn't want to hurt their feelings and risk losing those sponsorship dollars, which we may have done. We don't know. We'll go into negotiations next year with companies, and maybe MSI doesn't want to know us anymore. We don't know. But that wasn't something that we were concerned about.
It's just not a consideration.
It's not a
It's never a
consideration.
consideration.
There's always other companies. We'll find other ways, and we work for you guys. So
yeah,
we
I
have
think
no interest in hiding anything like that from you.
Yeah, and I think the point is that, we can say all this stuff and that's all nice, but you guys can see the evidence of what's going on the channel. If you get products and something looks a bit off, please get in contact with us. If something that we've shown doesn't actually turn out to be right with retail models or whatever the situation is, but you guys can review, as you mentioned, you can review the reviews effectively
as we go.
Just make sure that you are looking at a wide variety of different channels and different sources out there when you're buying products, because then you'll be able to figure out what's going on. And if we're being honest and our product reviews look like what you end up getting, then everything looks fine. So
I think just to wrap this one up, because we could go on and on about this forever. Basically, there was a whole lot of accusations in this anonymous Reddit post. I don't even want to pull apart that Reddit post. I did with our Patreon members in a behind the scenes video.
So sign up to our Patreon page and you can go watch all of our
and I did
content
that. I did that weeks ago when it first surfaced, mind you, because a couple of people on our Patreon Discord asked my opinion. So I thought, well, I'm going to give it. But it's just it's all made up. There's no evidence. Well, as far as we can tell, it's made up. We've not seen any evidence on our end that it's true, and they haven't presented any evidence. So it's, I don't know.
It's just frustrating, isn't it? It's frustrating that you can make up some garbage rumor and sort of question people's credibility out there. And as we said, you guys are sort of going to dictate whether we are credible or not. But when you get these garbage rumors coming out there, and
it's not,
some people
it's not good enough to say, oh, we know Nvidia's done dodgy stuff in the past, or we know Intel. Like, we pulled them up on GPP straight away when we vetted that story from Kyle. We're like, no, we think we're confident when we spoke to our industry sources that this is legitimate, and we ran with it. Principal technology thing, we did the same. There's not too many AMD examples. We pulled them up on that mess up they did with the RX 560.
Yep.
And if Nvidia is doing something dodgy, going about the way that this was done actually allows them and any YouTubers who may be guilty to get away with it. It's just silly. Anyway, I think we've talked about it enough. We could go on and on. We talked about it on the live stream for about half an hour or so. So that's that one. Let's move on to the next question.
Okay. That stuff's behind us. Now we get into the next question. Has Asus responded to your guys after their TUF RX 5700 XT debacle? Surely they have to improve the design of the product so that it doesn't have a catastrophic fate in the long run. They really need to own up their mistakes like MSI did with the X570 series.
Yeah, well, I'd like to see MSI do more with their lower end boards there, but that's a separate thing. Yes, they contacted me the very morning the video went up, mere hours after it was live. I think it was 8:30 a.m. in the morning. I was having breakfast, so I missed that call, but they rang me back again. So I got on the call with them, and they were pretty good about it, really. They were a little bit upset about the fact that I said that Asus wouldn't provide samples, which I didn't exactly say. I went to say it and said, actually, that's not fair. They've sort of given me the runaround, which is completely fair. And they just said, they gave me the reasons for why there was delays on getting the sample, which, whatever. The point is, we wanted to cover this product. There wasn't a single review from sort of a reputable or well-known source globally. So nobody had reviewed this thing. And what pushed me to buy it was we had about 3 or 4 different Patreon members saying they were this close to buying it. They were tossing up between that and the red the Red Dragon from Power Color. So anyway, they were tossing up between 2 cards. They were thinking of buying it, so I thought, well, I'm going to buy it and test it out. And yeah, it sucked. But basically, they didn't have too much to say. They were adamant that they could fix it, but I don't see how, like with a BIOS update, so that was peculiar.
Throttling the memory.
Well, I said to them, look, I'm going to be completely... Unless I'm missing something, unless you downclock the memory significantly or undervolt it to the point where it may be unstable, I don't see how you can reduce the temperatures without upgrading. Because the problem is that little heat spreader, the very, very, very thin bit of aluminium they have around it, no airflow gets to that essentially through the heatsink. It's completely blocked by the heatsink above. And that's why it's important to make them, if you're going with that design, make it full card length so the airflow at the other end of the card can help the heat spread and then dissipate. So anyway, I don't know what they're going to do with that product, to be honest with you. I think it's probably a pretty low priority product for them because they probably don't expect to sell that many of them. It's obviously very bad for their brand image. But at this point in time, if there is a fix, I'll certainly do an updated video. But basically, they didn't dispute my findings or anything like that. So I'm confident that my results are accurate. They seem to be based on what other people are reporting. And I wouldn't have posted them or published them if I wasn't very, very confident in them. So at this point in time, not sure what they're going to do about it. Bit of a quick one here. Ryzen 5 2600 or Ryzen 5 3500. So the 3500 is it's not OEM only, it's system integrator only. So it's for people who make, custom PCs and sell them in
I've seen some
reasonable volumes.
I've seen some builds pop up in Australia using them.
Okay, I'm still trying to get my hands on one. AMD haven't been particularly helpful, but that's not surprising. But I'll try and track one down and do some very in-depth testing for you guys. But basically, it's a Ryzen 5 3600 with SMT disabled.
Yep, that's right.
So the Ryzen 5 2600 is obviously a Zen Plus part, 6 cores, 12 threads. If they were the same price, I think I would lean towards the Ryzen 5 2600. I think it's going to last a bit longer with that SMT support. SMT is quite powerful on the Zen parts. So what do you reckon?
I think that's probably fair. I mean, do we know Ryzen 5 3500 pricing? Because that would determine a lot of it.
I think we're assuming that they're based on the way
they're the same price.
I think this person's sort of, saying, same price, what should you get?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if the IPC gains of the Zen 2 design could compensate for the SMT that you do get on the 2600. I mean,
yeah, I don't think
I don't think it would quite get to that level, would it?
No, I don't think so.
It depends on clock speeds as well. So, yeah, I think you're probably right on that one.
Yeah, without testing it, providing in-depth testing, and we're taking a bit of a guess, but I think I would, want the 12-thread option there for the same price. Okay, so that completes part 1 of this month's Q&A. Again, plenty of good questions there, but I think we have a lot more good questions coming up, and then we'll have a part 3 later in the week. I think we're squeezing in a monitor review.
There's some stuff coming on.
We've got plenty of content. We've got some other stuff that we can't talk about that has to go in there. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
We'll see you again next time.